We sat in the attic in the darkness of a blackout night, listening to thunder crashing outside, and we made a promise to each other that if one day we each ended up in a different place, then as long as there was a storm, we would come back. I was 12 years old in the summer of 1969. The biggest storm of my childhood memory hit the small town where I grew up. The power went out suddenly, and everything sank into a thick, pitch-black darkness. My mother lit candles downstairs, while my father silently pulled the curtains shut. As for me, I grabbed my blanket and pillow, flashlight in hand, and snuck up to the attic with my brother Tom and little Billy. At first, we did not talk much. Just laid there, listening to the wind howling and the floorboards trembling beneath us. Then Tom began telling a story. I could not tell if it was a ghost story or some made-up movie plot. But slowly, in between the thunder and the flickers of lightning, each of us started to say the things we normally would never dare to speak out loud. Our fears, our wishes, and finally, a promise. No adults heard it, and no paper ever recorded it. But that promise, the vow to come back if life ever brought a storm into one of our worlds, etched itself into my childhood deeper than any holiday ever could. And that night, it was not the storm outside, but that very moment in the dark attic that became the memory I could never forget. If you've ever had a quiet moment like that, in the dark with the sound of rain, feel free to leave a few words in the comments. Who knows, maybe someone out there is remembering their own night while listening to this story. And if you believe that memories are worth holding on to, do not forget to hit that subscribe button so that each week we can relive another little piece of childhood together. And if you asked me how that night began, then let me take you back to the very start, to when the sky began to change color and the whole town seemed to hold its breath waiting for a storm to arrive. That memory began on a heavy afternoon when a coppery red light poured down over the town, casting a strange, silent film over everything. The whole world seemed to pause, like someone had turned down the volume on life itself, leaving only the shrill cries of cicadas in the leaves and the sound of your own quickened breath under the harsh, early summer sun. I remember exactly how it felt. Riding my bike home from the little corner store, my shirt stuck to my back, hands coated in dust, sweat running down my spine after just a few turns of the wheels. There was not a single breeze. The air was so thick, it felt like you could cut it with a knife. The curtains in our house clung to the window frames, as if pulled tight against the glass by the heat. In the back kitchen, everything looked hazy in the golden light. No one spoke loudly, just small, careful movements. The soft clink of a glass being set down, the quiet chop of a knife on a cutting board, and then the rustle of my father flipping a newspaper page. But that strange silence, that wordless stillness, was the first thing that made the grown-ups uneasy. It was not like a normal afternoon. It felt like the pause between notes in a song when everything waits for something to crash down. My mother was out by the back steps, tying down the laundry lines with a piece of rope. Her beige cotton dress was darkened with sweat along the back, speckled with dust and sunlight. Every movement was brisk and efficient, but still carried a quiet tension. The wind had not yet picked up, but the sky was already sagging, like a thick blanket about to smother everything below. She did not look at me, just spoke over her shoulder. "Rain's coming, Jack. Big one. Get inside and help me bring in the towels." I did not ask questions, just quietly stepped forward. My hands, still small and clumsy back then, fumbled with the wooden clips gripping the damp fabric. The towels were still warm from the sun, but we rolled them up fast and stuffed them into the metal basket. No one smiled. No one said another word. But I could feel it. Something was building. In the kitchen, my father sat silently at the table, holding an old oil lamp. He turned the metal cap with careful hands, adding oil bit by bit, like it was a ritual he had repeated for years. My father never talked much, but whenever he prepared something this carefully, I knew something serious was coming. He checked the wick, wiped the glass cover, and placed the lamp by the window, right in the spot he always used when storms came. My mother turned on the radio. Static filled the room as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for that familiar voice. "This is Northeast Ohio Regional Radio. A tropical storm is
approaching. Strong gusts, heavy rain, and possible power outages in multiple residential areas." The words were flat, like a command. I didn't understand everything, but the phrase power outage made my heart beat faster. For a child, losing power was not something scary. On the contrary, it sparked a strange kind of excitement. Darkness, candles, indoor games, whispered ghost stories, and maybe a tiny little adventure. Outside on the porch, Tom, my older brother, was sitting with one leg thrown over the railing. His dark brown hair was damp with sweat at the back of his neck, and he held half an apple in his hand. He did not look the least bit worried. If anything, he seemed to enjoy the tension in the air. His eyes were fixed on the darkening sky, not with fear, but as if waiting for something thrilling to begin. He grinned slightly, never looking up, and said, "Let it rain, just don't mess up movie night." There was something half joking, half serious in his tone, and somehow it made it easier for me to breathe, even if just a little. Billy, my youngest brother, was only 7 at the time, clutching his one-eared teddy bear like a shield. He stood by the window frame, staring out at the sky growing darker by the minute. His face was beaded with sweat, his big round eyes shining with a mix of curiosity and quiet fear. He turned to Mom and asked, "Mom, can thunder burn our house down?" She crouched down, smiled gently, and brushed his hair. "No, sweetheart. Our house is strong. We've been through worse storms than this." But when she stood up, I saw her glance quickly toward the backyard, where the old maple tree had started to sway, as if whispering something only adults could understand. That afternoon had a very specific smell. The scent of damp towels that had not fully dried, the leftover grease from lunch, ham stir-fried with crispy potatoes, something Mom had whipped up quickly, the oil in the lamp wick my dad had just refilled. It all mixed into the heavy air, drifting through the faded blue cotton curtains. Light filtered through the window, casting long shadows across the dark wooden dining table, turning the whole kitchen into a scene tinted in vintage yellow. And I stood there, quiet, taking in every little movement inside a house, getting ready for something big. No one laughed. No one snapped. Everything was waiting. And I, a 12-year-old kid, did not fully understand it, but I could feel it deep down. Something was about to happen. Not disaster, but memory. That sweltering afternoon when everyone started shutting the windows, drawing the curtains, unplugging the radio, and quietly checking each candle, each door. That was the moment everything began. Not just a storm in the sky, but the first storm inside of me. That strange feeling of learning to worry, to wonder, to listen, and to hold on to each image, deep in memory, with words not yet spoken, feelings
Still unnamed, and a promise not yet formed. And then, what we had been waiting for finally came. Not lightning, not rain, but a dry, sharp click. The lights went out. The whole town sank into darkness. And that was when the real story began. The click came from the wall clock, a sound so small no one normally noticed. But that afternoon, it echoed like a signal. Then the whole house went dark. No television hum, no kitchen light, just the growing roar of wind outside the glass. The lights went out and everything seemed to freeze for a second. My mom, always prepared for a blackout, reached for the candle box in the drawer. She struck a match with practiced ease, and in the brief flicker between fire and darkness, I saw her face, blurry in the glow, her eyes filled with worry but steady. The first candle was lit, then the second. The kitchen, once familiar, now looked completely different, like an old stage lit by faded spotlights. Every object, the mug, the bowl, the dish towel, seemed wrapped in a layer of history. We gathered around the dining table. No one said much. Tom leaned back in his chair, staring at the flickering flames swaying in the breeze from the side door. Billy still held his teddy bear, eyes darting around as if searching for a spot safer than his wobbly, wooden chair. My father poured water into a glass, his hand trembling slightly, though he did not show it. I do not remember what we ate that night, if we even ate, but I remember how the soft yellow candlelight lit up each familiar face in that small kitchen. No one had to say anything, but after a few quiet minutes, I looked at my brothers and saw that silent agreement pass between us. It was time to retreat to base. Our attic was not big, just enough room for 3 kids to sit with their knees to their chests. Low ceiling, slanted walls, and that dusty wooden smell mixed with the scent of long forgotten things. The flashlight was our only tool, and I still remember the soft click as the switch flipped on, its weak beam cutting across the ceiling, where cobwebs swung gently in the wind, creeping through the roof tiles. Tom led the way. I followed, and Billy trailed behind, his teddy bear dangling so low it almost touched the steps. The wooden staircase to the attic creaked with each step. Creak, creak, like it was protesting after all those years of being ignored. I could feel the coldness of the worn wood under my bare feet as I climbed. At the top, Tom crawled in first and pulled out an old cardboard box filled with random toys. A homemade rubber band, gun, a few marbles, a broken flashlight. I spread out a couple of old blankets on the floor, while Billy huddled in a corner, eyes wide and watchful. We placed the flashlight in the center between us, casting shadows on our faces and like scenes from the adventure movies we watched on our black and white television. The wind picked up. It howled under the eaves like some wild creature lurking outside. Now and then, the whole house shook slightly from a gust. Each time, Billy flinched and leaned closer to me. Within minutes, that attic was no longer just a dusty room. It had become our secret base in the middle of the storm, the beginning of every adventure we would remember. In just a few minutes, that tiny attic turned into a universe of its own for the three of us. Me, Tom, and Billy, each in our own little corner, bringing with us a small piece of the world we believed in. Outside, the wind howled like a never-ending cry. The rain hammered the tin roof in urgent, steady beats, making the whole house shudder. But to us kids, it was not something to fear. It was the soundtrack of an adventure beginning. The attic was not big. Sloped roof, low ceiling, rough gray wooden walls. We had to crouch low to move around. But that only added to the childlike magic, because with just a flick of the flashlight toward a ceiling corner, it could become a bunker, a hideout, the command center of three heroes, weathering an imaginary storm. I pulled a few threadbare blankets from an old box, folded and laid them on the wooden floor. The boards creaked with every movement. It was cold, but not freezing. We had not brought much, just a small flashlight, a worn Superman comic with the spine peeling off, 3 leftover mint candies from the kitchen drawer, and of course, Billy's one-eared teddy bear, his constant companion. Billy sat down right as we arrived, hugging his teddy bear tightly. He placed it gently beside him as if he was afraid of hurting it. The bear was far from perfect. Its fur had peeled off in patches, one button eye was missing, and its left ear had been torn during a battle with the neighbor's dog a few weeks earlier. But to Billy, it was still his best friend. Tom sat cross-legged near the edge of the attic, flipping a few glass marbles in his hand. The flashlight made them sparkle, red and green like tiny gemstones. He said nothing at first, just gave us his usual crooked smile, then pulled a wooden toy gun from his pocket. He had carved it from a scrap piece of wood he found at the auto shop, then painted it red with a marker. It obviously could not shoot, but Tom always said, as long as it looks real. I held my worn-out Superman comic book. I did not read it, just flipped through the pages with my fingertips. I remembered the part where Clark Kent stepped into a phone booth and came out as Superman. And I used to wish we had a phone booth like that in our town. Each of us sat quietly in our own little world, yet we shared one invisible space. Imagination. Tom broke the silence first, speaking in his steady storytelling voice. Once upon a time, there was a boy stuck at home during a storm. He thought he was in a secret base, but really, the house had been abandoned for over 30 years. The story did not need to make sense. For Tom, it was all about how he told it. The well-timed pauses, the sideways glances, the way he gripped his wooden gun tighter at tense parts. Billy and I sat, frozen. Each time Tom paused, our hearts beat a little faster. Outside, the rain seemed louder. Wind whistled through the roof tiles, making the attic tremble. Billy pulled his knees up and tugged the blanket to his chin, then turned to me in a tiny voice. "What if the wind really blows our house away, Jack?" He was not joking. That question held real fear, the kind of fear that comes when a child begins to realize the world is not always in their control. I did not answer right away. I just patted Billy on the shoulder and said, "If we fly away, then we fly away together." Tom heard that, gave a small nod, then pulled 2 candies from his back pocket. He tossed one to me and one to Billy. Considerate emergency rations, 1 each, strict survival rules. I remember laughing softly, not because it was funny, but because it felt oddly comforting. 3 kids, nothing much in our hands but a few scattered things, yet we felt completely safe. We huddled close, shoulders touching, whispering like the outside world was truly dangerous. I think that may have been the first time in my life I understood the power of belonging, not to a school club, not to a baseball team, but to a small group of 3 brothers sharing a storm, a dark night, and a piece of memory that would never fade. The flashlight started to dim. Its glow turned soft yellow, then began to flicker. But no one cried, no one called for Mom. We just sat there, letting the wind whip across the roof, letting the storm surround us, and letting childhood drift by peacefully to the sound of steady rain on a rusty tin roof. Then the thunder started rolling in waves, and the lightning slashed across the ceiling like scars carved into memory. Inside that cramped little base, we began to dream of things far bigger than ourselves. Every time thunder struck, the ceiling seemed to shiver. Lightning sliced through the cracks in the wooden roof, casting a white flash that vanished just as quickly as it came. Wind rushed through the gaps, sending old papers tumbling across the floor and into the dark corners. The 3 of us, Tom, Billy, and I, huddled around the little flashlight. Its light was weak now, barely enough to see each other's faces, but still enough to let us know we were there. That attic felt like a ship adrift in a stormy sea. Outside was a world we could not control. Inside were 3 children, trying to make sense of it in their own quiet ways. I do not remember who started it. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was a particularly loud thunderclap that made Billy shrink back and whisper, "What if we wake up tomorrow and the house is gone?" I looked at him, then around the attic. Everything here was familiar, but in the dim light and stormy sounds, it felt like it was already slipping away. And I do not know what made me say it, but I did. If we are not here tomorrow, then tonight each of us should say the one thing we most want to do. At first, no one said anything. Billy just stared down, nervously picking at the edge of the blanket. Tom leaned back against the wall, eyes fixed on the moldy wooden beam above. I thought he might scoff or crack a joke, but he did not. None of us did. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was that feeling, like time had slowed, just for the 3 of us to say something we had never dared to say before. Billy was the first to speak, voice as soft as a breeze lost in the rain. "I want to open a bakery, just a tiny one, selling apple pies like Mom makes. With a big glass window facing the street, I'll bake all day and give free pies to kids on Fridays." I turned to look at him. Billy's eyes sparkled, not because he was emotional, but because he could see it in his head. I could see it too. Billy behind the counter, flour on his shirt, glowing with pride as he carried out a tray of warm pies. Some might say that dream was small, but to me It was an entire world. A world my little brother had quietly built inside himself for a long time. Then it was my turn. I did not think long. I held up my Superman comic, flipped through a few wrinkled pages. I want to be an astronaut, fly into space, see Earth from way up there, like in the NASA photos. I want to know what it feels like to float, to be far away from everything, and not be scared anymore. Tom let out a short laugh, not a mocking one, just quiet and unreadable. I did not mind. I knew that was my real dream. When I was younger, I used to lie on the grass in our backyard, staring up at the stars, imagining myself drifting between them. Never knew how wide the universe really was, but I always believed somewhere out there was a place quiet enough to hear every question. Tom was silent longer than I expected. He still leaned against the wall, eyes half closed, fiddling with the flashlight in his hand. I thought he would say he wanted to be the best baseball pitcher in town, or maybe a soldier like Dad once talked about. But instead he said, softly, without looking at us, "I don't need much. I just want us to stay like this." That made me turn to look at him. And I swear, it was the first time I'd ever seen Tom, who was always tough, always pretending not to care, look truly afraid. Not afraid of the storm, not of lightning or losing the house, but afraid of something harder to name, that after tonight, things would change, that we would grow up, go our separate ways, and that this attic, this base in the middle of a storm, would become nothing more than a memory. No one said anything else. The three of us just sat there in the dark, listening to the rain tapping on the roof, the wind howling through the tiles, and each other's breathing. A small space, but big enough to hold all of childhood. I still remember how it felt, my chest full, though I did not know with what. I only knew I had just shared something real with the only two people in the world who could truly understand it. No need to explain, no need for reasons, just to be there and to listen. Now that I look back, I understand why that night stayed with me so deeply. Because in that storm, between the cracks of thunder, was the first time we ever spoke our truest wishes. Not to make them come true, but to make them last. Like each lightning bolt was a wish. Bright, fleeting, and gone. But if someone heard it, if someone witnessed it, then maybe, just maybe, the wish would not disappear.
We had barely finished speaking when the sky answered with a sharp, ear-splitting crack of lightning. A white-blue flash slashed across the ceiling again, slicing the small attic space like a blade of light. Billy flinched and buried himself into me, and Tom furrowed his brow slightly, but stayed still. Outside, the storm was no longer just a setting for adventure. It was real now, loud, wild, and threatening. The wind howled like voices screaming through the windows. Rain pounded the roof like war drums. Every time the gusts blew through the cracks, the attic trembled, not just from the cold, but from a creeping unease that seeped in like water through old wood. I stopped thinking about being an astronaut or Superman or any dream at all. I just felt the worry creeping in. Not the kind of worry a kid feels when they get a bad grade or break a glass. A real kind of worry. Heavy, quiet, and rising. just like the storm outside was reaching its peak. I started wondering what Mom was doing downstairs. Maybe lighting more candles. Maybe worrying about where her 3 kids had disappeared to in the pitch-black house. And Dad, I knew he would not say much, but he would be standing by the kitchen door, holding the oil lamp, staring out the back door like he was guarding something from being swept away. Thinking of that scene made my chest tighten. I wanted to go down, but I knew Mom would say, "Stay up there with your brothers." And deep down I knew I should stay. Tom suddenly stood up. He said nothing, just leaned forward and stepped quickly toward the stairs. The wooden floor groaned under his feet, loud in the quiet attic. I sat up fast, almost asking, "Where are you going?" But I did not. Billy just looked up. We were used to Tom's kind of silence, the kind that needed no explanation. Time passed slowly after that. I do not know how long, maybe minutes, maybe more. Every thunderclap made Billy flinch, gripping my arm tighter, his eyes fixed on the attic door like he was scared. Tom would not come back. I had the same fear, even if I never said it. Then the door creaked open. Tom returned, carrying something wrapped in a towel. He set it down, unwrapped it, and I saw it was a radio. The old kind our dad used to listen to news every morning. It was not a big one, just a small black plastic box, worn at the corners, dust still clinging to it. But when Tom turned the knob, tuned the dial, and a deep male voice came through the static, the attic seemed to light up without needing any light at all. This is WQNH Radio. Level 3 storm warning remains in effect for the Northeast Ohio area. Then a clap of thunder, then the broadcaster's voice returned, layered with static, but never cutting out. It was the first sound that did not come from the storm, the sound of the world beyond. And for 3 kids clinging to a sense of connection, it felt like the first breath after holding one's lungs underwater for too long. Tom placed the radio in the middle of us. We said nothing, just quietly laid down, shoulders touching, eyes staring at the dark wooden ceiling above. The rain kept falling, relentless. But now the voice on the radio, scratchy as it was, became the backdrop to a fragile kind of calm. Billy was the first to fall asleep. He was no longer curled up in fear like earlier. His teddy bear was tucked between his chin and shoulder, and his face was peaceful, like the storm outside was nothing more than a fairy tale. I lay beside him, watching him breathe. Something in me softened, not because of the blanket, not because of the radio, but because of that quiet feeling of the 3 of us still being together on a night we would never forget. Tom kept his eyes open. I knew he was not asleep. He always stayed awake longer than us, even when we were little. He said nothing, just sat silently at the edge of the mattress, watching the weak beam of the flashlight draw pale patterns across the old attic ceiling. I looked at him, and I saw a stillness on his face. Not quite the look of a boy anymore, not yet fully grown either. It was a mix of everything. His gaze drifted far, past the ceiling boards darkened by age, like he was reaching beyond the storm, into something deeper. And I felt something heavy lift from my chest. Not all of it, but enough to breathe easier. The storm outside no longer felt like a threat. Now the sound of rain had become a kind of music,
gentle and steady, underscoring a quiet moment of growing up. That feeling, silent and warm, was not sad, not hollow. It felt like the very first time I touched the edge of becoming older. I exhaled slowly, accepting that from this moment on, I was no longer just a boy hiding in the attic every time it rained, but someone beginning to carry a promise into manhood. 3 kids gathered around an old radio, listening to the outside world hum through static. It was not a digital connection. It was a heartbeat, pulsing between memory and the now. I still remember the way the flashlight's glow burned faint lines across my skin, how the radio's crackle sounded almost like Mom's voice retelling stories. And somehow, that sensation came back to life. Though the roof trembled in the wind, inside that attic, there was still a small sky carved out just for the 3 of us. A place where fear was not punished, where a promise silently held us close. I looked over at Tom. He had not moved, his hand resting lightly on mine. Not gripping, just there. A reminder. We are still together. Billy was sound asleep, hugging his teddy, breathing softly, like a slow-turning wheel that kept safety spinning, and I realized I was no longer the little boy everyone used to see. I was growing quietly, deeply, through memory, through silence, through a childhood promise that had become the quiet breath of becoming someone new. Outside, the wind still howled and rain still pounded. But in the small attic, in the fading light of the radio, between 3 still bodies and steady breathing, I knew the most important thing had happened. I had grown enough to understand that not all promises need to be spoken twice. Some are kept simply by being present, quietly, and holding on.
And when the radio's sound began to fade, and only the soft breathing in the dark attic remained, Tom suddenly turned to us and said something I would remember for years, like I had just heard it yesterday. Outside, the world beyond the attic seemed to be in full revolt. Rain roared across the roof, and wind slammed against the old window frame, making the wooden planks shudder like they might snap under the force. The flashlight flickered, its dull yellow light pushed around by gusts sneaking through the cracks, painting shaky shadows across the wood. But within that little window, in that loud, cramped space, 3 kids sat still. And something intense hovered there, like a spring of feeling quietly rising. Tom, the oldest, remained calm as ever. I remember his face. It had not changed much. His eyes steady, his features strong from years of growing. But if you looked closely, that protective instinct was still there. Then suddenly, he looked straight at us, his 2 younger brothers. And in the middle of the storm outside, he whispered, "If one day we can no longer sit here like this, then tonight, let's promise, if there is ever a storm, no matter how big, we will come back." The words landed softly, but strong enough to cut through wind and rain. In that moment, all the memories of childhood washed over me, and I knew, deep in my chest, this was not just a kid's promise. It was a truth. Growing up did not have to mean growing apart. It could mean choosing to return, even if only in your heart, even if only for a moment. I did not respond with words. Instead, I slowly sat up, my shoulders trembling a little, my chest tight with emotion. My small hand rested on my knee, and then I reached out, hesitantly, toward the center. The youngest, Billy, half asleep, saw my hand and placed his on top of it. His fingers were small, uncertain. The wind outside was howling, but my hand felt warm, not hot, just incredibly warm. A moment later, Tom laid his bigger hand on top of ours, sealing it, quietly. No fanfare, no speeches. Just 3 hands stacked together, silent, serious. A whispered vow, strong as stone, to keep 3 childhood hearts beating in sync through time. No one ever repeated that promise. We never had to. The storm outside kept roaring. In the faint light of a dying flashlight, with a thin beam slipping through the attic window, the hearts of 3 brothers beat in unison. Steady, unshaken, no matter how far we grew, no matter how lost we might become, the promise would hold us together. Tom leaned his head back against the damp wall, eyes deep in thought, staring up at the shadowed ceiling. Billy, clutching his teddy bear, nodded off, as if he had just completed the biggest mission of his life without even realizing it. I breathed out quietly, a strange emptiness mixed with comfort swelling inside me. And I wondered, could this promise really ride the waves of time, survive every change, and pull us back together when we were older? I may have forgotten dozens of birthdays. I do not remember the first time I fell off a bike, or the first joke Tom told about stale candy, or even the exact page where I started reading Superman. Those little moments that life tends to erase. But that night, a summer storm night, with howling winds and flickering light, I will never forget. I cannot forget. That night, 3 kids made a promise. There was the smell of damp wool sweaters, the taste of mint candy, a teddy bear with 1 torn ear, and the steady, serious look from an older brother in the rain, all of it carved into my memory. It was a promise that just by remembering, I could still hear the rain, still feel the wind, and still see that little shelter standing strong. The night stretched on. I lay there beneath the soft, purple beam of our flickering flashlight and thought, if someday we each drift away to our own corners of the world, please let this promise remain, so that whenever a storm returns, we will remember there is still a roof to come home to, even if it is only under the glow of a dim flashlight. Even if the storm outside screams, deep inside, one strong memory will pull us back together. I do not remember when we finally fell asleep, but when I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was not my brothers, but a soft streak of sunlight slipping through the cracked roof. So peaceful, it stopped my breath. I woke up not knowing exactly when I had drifted off, but the chill left by the storm lingered on my skin in a strangely calming way. And then the first light crept through the gaps in the old wooden roof,
brushing softly against the ceiling. That light felt like a golden thread, not harsh, just warm and gentle, like a quiet promise whispered in the dark. Everything is okay. We are still here. The attic, once a fortress in the night, now felt like the coziest place on earth. Billy was still asleep, his head resting on my shoulder, his back gently rising with each breath. The one-eared teddy bear was tucked safely in his arms, still guarding him like the only friend who had stood through the storm. I did not dare whisper or shake him awake. I just curled closer, holding on to that soft warmth, feeling the rhythm of safety pass from little brother to big brother. The pale morning light drifted across the worn blanket, rising with each breath, lifting away the last damp layers of the storm. From the small window above, birdsong chirped cheerfully, mixing with the rustle of leaves in the wind, weaving a soft symphony of morning. Yesterday, that would have been just another sound of everyday life. But this morning, it was music. The perfect background to a new piece. The birds, the breeze, they washed away every trace of fear. I whispered, "Mom's calling us down for breakfast." My voice was soft as dew. Billy grinned in his sleep and nodded faintly. I closed my eyes again, trying to hold on to this moment. Warm sunlight, steady breathing, and the calm after the storm. I slowly stood up, taking the now dead flashlight, the last remaining light from the night before, and gently helped Billy down the stairs. Each creaking step sounded like a soft tap on memory. And then the smell of fresh bread drifted up from the kitchen, warm butter, rising yeast, everything melting into the air like a mother's wordless love. The power had not returned to the town, but the kitchen glowed with the warmth of fire and of motherhood. Mom stood at the table, wrapped in her light beige robe, her thin frame drawn close from the long night, her curly hair still slightly tousled. But her eyes, bright and calm, shone with morning. When Billy and I came down the stairs, she smiled like opening a door to peace. The wind, the thunder, the rush of fear, all disappeared in the softness of that look. In her hands was a loaf of freshly baked bread, still steaming, the towel beneath glowing with warmth. Tom was already awake. He stood beside her, his hair still damp, a quiet badge of a sleepless night. He looked at me, then at Billy, the way we clung to each other, and he smiled gently. His eyes, full
of quiet warmth, told me that after the storm, the world was still intact. Mom said, "Come eat, sweethearts." Her voice was not urgent or loud, just gentle, like a kiss on the forehead from someone who knows what you need without asking. We sat around the old wooden table. The light did not come from any lamp. It came from the oven's fire, from Mom's smile, from Tom's eyes. We needed no words of comfort. Their presence was enough to quiet every fear. The bread crackled as I bit into it, crisp on the outside, soft at the center. The taste of butter was delicate, and the sweet warmth of the yeast carried a message. Life might be full of storms, but mornings like this are still worth living for. I closed my eyes and breathed in the steam rising from the bread. If I could remember just one moment in my life,
If I had only one to hold on to, this morning would be it. This would be my anchor, my homecoming. Outside the window, the town was still quiet. No cars, no people. Just 3 kids, a mother, and the first warmth of early summer. A bare, simple morning, yet bursting with life. Storms might pass through our lives, but the light after the rain, a warm morning, siblings, together the smell of bread, bird song, that never leaves. But time does not pause like that morning did. The days after the storm passed by slowly, then faster. The sun came back, and one by one, including me, we began to forget the promise we made in the dark. Time, the quietest thief of all, carried our youth like a stream that never stops. I cannot say when exactly, but I remember the first thing I forgot was not the thunder or the wind, but the feeling of saying the word attic, the golden warmth of the sun, the scent of freshly baked bread, and the whisper we made in the storm. If there is a storm, we will return. As life picked up speed, that image faded like footprints in sand. Not gone, just buried beneath the weight of growing up. Tom was no longer the boy who led us out of the dark that night. He left town just as the wind began to cool. I remember the way Mom watched him from the yard, her face a mix of worry and pride. His first letter, handwritten with slightly shaky lines, was all about military life. Harsh training, new comrades, the freezing skies above the barracks. But somewhere in all that strictness, there was one short line. Do you still remember the attic? Remember the promise? If there is a storm, I will come home. I read it again and again, each time it pierced my chest. That promise had not died. It was just sleeping inside memory. As for me, the narrator, I stepped into college life where everything revolved around essays, presentations, and the haunting question, who am I? Where am I going? In my cramped dorm room, under fluorescent lights and beside a cup of black coffee, that childhood promise echoed faintly, too soft to demand attention. But in the late hours, when my face leaned heavy over the keyboard, I remembered that promise was still waiting, somewhere beyond this town, beyond the storms of youth. Billy, the youngest, never went to college, a choice made almost instinctively. He opened a small air conditioner repair shop in the front yard. His hands worked with bolts and motors, like he was still chasing the warmth of that summer night. But each evening before closing shop, he would pull out a sketch pad and quietly draw the attic. Slow strokes, no color, unnamed, but heavy with memory. That picture needed no caption. When I asked him once, he simply smiled. I draw to remember, so I won't forget. And so that promise, the one echoed through the storm, became like a locked keepsake box. We stopped talking about it because we were all busy building our own empires. Tom with discipline, me with deadlines, Billy with broken fans and dusty tools. Time moved on, but memory did not dissolve. It hid in the ink of letters sent home in the graphite lines of a quiet drawing. In a moment of deadline panic, I would remember Billy's small hand holding mine in that storm. In the middle of a morning run, Tom might feel it too, that the promise was still alive. Time does not erase memory. It selects. It keeps only what is worth keeping. And our promise, when the storm comes we return, survived. It never shouted, but it whispered, steady, like drops of water carving out stone. It waited for the next storm, for the attic to light up again, for the three of us to speak the unspeakable.
Then, one July afternoon, after many dry years, the sky darkened again. I was about to close the window when I heard the first thunderclap. And right after came a knock on the door. Familiar. Like an unwritten law, time had carried us far away. And now it brought Tom back, like a storm no one expected. That night the sky grew heavy with dark clouds, and the cold wind returned, as if to wake something long asleep. I was in my cozy living room with my wife and 2 kids, the conversation still hanging mid-sentence when a gust slipped through the window, rustling the curtain and stirring memories I thought I had tucked away for good. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then faster, harder, beating against the porch like a drum roll. I stood up to close the front door, brushing aside a strange tightness in my chest. And then there was a knock. Not loud, not rushed, just a steady sound, like a memory knocking to be let in. I opened the door, and there he was, my brother, Tom. He was soaked, but not shaken. He stood tall in a jacket, soaked from the storm, the posture of a soldier who had seen his share of battles. His face was older, his nose marked by time, a few strands of silver in his hair. But his eyes, they were the same. That familiar warmth and spark. I exhaled, like I had been holding my breath for years. It was real. I was opening the door to my brother, returning home right when the storm had begun again. We did not speak for a moment. I pulled him inside. His coat still dripped. This rain seemed stronger than before, as if testing the strength of our promise. He did not rush to speak, just smiled. The kind of smile carved from youth and responsibility. Then, through the storm, he said, voice quiet but steady, "Do you remember the promise?" I froze. My heart skipped a beat. The rain outside became a soundtrack, the music of reunion. I felt my chest tighten. That promise, once whispered in the attic, now returned through rain and the flicker of a porch light. I pulled Tom further in. He followed without a word, his steps trembling slightly from cold or maybe from the feeling of coming home. I grabbed a towel and gently dried his hair. He looked at me with eyes I had never quite seen before. Relieved, familiar. A brother once sworn to protect me. A memory I had feared to lose. The rain kept falling. But inside, in this small, familiar space, the promise came alive again. A quiet bond of brotherhood, strong and simple, needing no grand speeches to be understood. I asked my wife to bring hot tea and a blanket. Tom sat cradling the warm cup, sipping in silence. I was not sure if I was crying or if my heartbeat was just too loud. In the storm, we did not need many words. For the first time in years,
The promise was no longer a memory floating by. It was real, present, awake.
The rain had not let up. We sat across from each other in the glow of a soft yellow lamp. No big conversation. Just one glance from Tom toward the kitchen, and he asked quietly, "Do you still have the old wooden table, Jack?" Years may pass by like a train on rails. But that night, when Tom stood at my door in the rain, the old promise stirred again, pulling all three brothers back to where it began, the attic, where three rain-soaked kids lit a flashlight and vowed they would return whenever the storm came. The wooden door creaked open and we stepped into the attic, time folding back to when we were 12. The stairs still groaned under our feet, each step like a heartbeat of memory. The space was empty, dusty but not lifeless. Beams of faint light cut through the small window, casting soft shadows like fingerprints from the past. Inside me, something echoed. We came back. We did not say it. We did not have to. Our steps matched, 3 silent rhythms. And that was enough to stir something warm that had slept too long. Billy, now a grown man, placed the same flashlight between us. His hand trembled slightly as he flipped the switch, and unsurprisingly, the bulb did not turn on. But we were not disappointed. He smiled softly, eyes still holding that old glimmer, as if to say, "It is okay. The light is still here, inside us." Tom slowly pulled out the old radio. Its casing faded, the dial smooth from years of touch. He turned the knob. A soft hum of static filled the attic. No program came through, just that quiet fuzz. A silence that spoke, as if saying, "I never left." We sat down, the 3 of us. No words needed. Years had drawn lines across our lives. Distances, responsibilities, adulthood. But this moment did not ask who we had become. It simply reminded us we were still us. We needed no comics, no games, only this quiet truth. Love does not change. Memories may sleep, but they do not die. The rain outside roared like a train passing by. But inside the attic, the silence softened everything. There was only the smell of old wood, the warmth of being together, and the echo of a far-off storm. I looked at my brothers. Tom tilted his head slightly, faint lines across his cheek. Billy smiled, shy but bright, and I felt something rise in me, something I could not name. But it felt like the first time I believed in magic again, that a promise, once made, never really fades. It just waits, heartbeat by heartbeat, for the chance to breathe again. We sat in the dark. An old radio, a broken flashlight, the warmth of memory, the sound of rain, and something else. The unspoken presence of brotherhood. We sat together because we had a place to return to and people to hold on to through every storm. We stayed there, still and silent. The rain outside grew heavier, pounding harder with each passing minute. Then, in a sudden hush between the drops, I heard a voice,
faint, like it was echoing from somewhere far away, hazy and unreachable. "You boys playing in the storm again?" The voice was soft, full of warmth, like a winding breeze brushing open an old door in my mind, bringing me back to that kitchen where fresh bread once held our family together. Mom's voice, so familiar it was part of every day, now rang strangely clear. Like a gentle spell, it awakened every feeling of comfort that had long been asleep. I looked down toward the kitchen, the place that had cradled our childhood. The stove still gave off faint steam, though no fire burned beneath it. Her figure was small, moving slowly, holding a pan or a tray of bread, her eyes dim, but her smile filled with love. She said nothing more, just smiled. A quiet smile, holding an entire lifetime of silent love. That kitchen, that space, still carried the same old smells: warm toasted bread, the soft tang of yeast, the melting whisper of butter. These scents did not just stir memories. They unlocked a door long shut, letting us fully feel connected to her, to the past, to the feeling of being home. The three of us, Tom, Billy, and I, could eat and said nothing. Tom looked at me, his eyes meeting mine with a wave of memory so strong it almost knocked the breath out of me. Billy, thinner now, smiled gently, not because of the voice, but because he understood. It was not the present calling us, but love reaching through time, still alive despite all the dust of forgetting. We, three grown men, after all these years, stood up together. I reached down and took Billy's smaller hand in mine, steadying his steps like I used to. Tom walked ahead, the oldest brother leading the family home, not to a new place, but to one we had never truly left. When the kitchen door creaked open, the warm glow of soft yellow light spilled into the attic. And somewhere between light and shadow, I said to Tom and Billy, "That was Mom calling, from memory, but no less real." We smiled at each other, stepping together into that familiar kitchen. No explanation needed, just a return to where love never faded, even if time had taken memory. What once felt fragile was now clear as morning sun, unchanged in color, eternal in the heart. That same afternoon we went back up to the attic, carrying with us Mom's voice and the rain that had finally begun to fade. And suddenly we realized some things, no matter how much time passes, remain exactly as they were. We climbed the staircase again, back to that small attic that had once been our childhood shelter, the place where three brothers dreamed and made a promise to return whenever storms rolled in. The door creaked open, and for a moment time held its breath. The dim room, dust glowing in the soft light from the old window, cast quiet patterns across the wooden walls, setting the scene for what was about to happen. Pale light danced across the dusty wooden floor, like an old film reel flickering through decades. Dust had settled on everything, but instead of dulling the space, it seemed to reveal it. The past stood there, not faded, but present. I inhaled deeply. That damp wood smell was still there. The breath of time soaked into every beam, every gap. Billy stepped forward first, holding the old flashlight tightly. It no longer worked, but to us, it still shone as brightly as ever. He placed it between the three of us, like placing a torch in the center of a sacred circle, keeping the flame of our imagination alive. That small act made Tom and I glance at each other and smile. No words were needed. The feeling was already there in our eyes. Tom reached up and wiped the dust off the old wooden beam above our heads. Slowly, the words carved long ago began to reappear. If there's a storm, we come home. The letters were faded, worn by time, but not lost. Just a soft touch to brush off the dust, and the memory came alive again. I reached out, ran my fingers across the carving. Something broke open inside me. A kind of joy so deep it hurt. The promise was still there. No one spoke. 1 second, 2. Then Tom took a deep breath, and in that moment the three of us were reconnected, the ones who had made the promise, the ones still here, and the ones who never let go. There were no comic books anymore, no games, not even the weak glow of the flashlight. We did not need anything beyond the light of the past and present blending together. Just three grown men returned to where it all began, to remember who they were, to hear the heartbeat of a promise that had never stopped echoing. The old radio was still there, its dial spinning through silence, only static coming through. But even that hum felt rich with memory. That sound, meaningless to some, filled us with peace. Storms may come, storms may go, but some things do not change. And in this moment, we were breathing again with that truth.
We sat there for a long time. No one spoke. Then Tom finally exhaled, eyes on the faintly carved words, and whispered, "Some things do not need to be said again, because we never forgot." The pale gold light from the attic window had faded now, leaving only thin streaks of brightness clinging to the old wood. The space felt thicker, warmer, as if memory itself had exhaled. I drew a long breath, feeling a strange lightness, and looked at my two brothers. All three of us men now. But in each of our eyes, the face of a boy still lingered. A boy who once held a teddy bear. A boy who once shook in a storm. And in each heart, the same quiet rhythm, still unbroken. We did not try to explain it. The storm outside could howl all it wanted. But in this attic, the rain was just background music. The air felt heavy, like the breath of the past had drifted into the present. After the silence, Tom, still steady, still strong, spoke again, his voice low, touched by understanding. Some things do not need repeating, because we never truly forgot. A simple sentence, not loud, not flowery, but it hit me like a truth chiseled into wood. Not all promises need to be repeated aloud to have value. Some are etched into your heart deeper than any carving. Some words, like sweat soaked into the wood, never fade no matter how much time passes, even if no one mentions them again. And again we fell silent. Only the faint light from the window, the patter of rain tapping the roof, and the quiet presence of three grown men. The memory of a single stormy night in childhood did not need to be polished or perfect.
It lived in us, untouched, needing no confirmation to be real. In my mind, I saw it like a photograph. 3 grown men sitting in a small attic, each holding the same old flashlight, symbols of a childhood, of a hope that never flickered out. We did not need to say more. The bond, the promise, the silent protection that had lasted through time. It was all still there, because no words are stronger than presence. No memory is louder than quiet love. And so, in the stormy night, where past met present, we were still here, brothers unchanged, no matter what the world had become outside. Alone now, with the steady sound of rain tapping against the window, I sat quietly in the corner of the living room. The light flickered, casting little shadows on the wall, stirring something deep inside me. I poured another cup of coffee, the warmth seeping into my hands, chasing away the cold the rain had pressed into my chest. I looked up toward the attic, that sacred space where youth, promises, and safety had once been built. And I whispered to myself, like calling out to 2 people I had not seen in a long time. Tom, Billy, it is raining again. The soft static from the old radio filled the room. It meant nothing, but it made me feel close to them, like they were right there, sitting beside me in memory. I took a sip of my coffee. The bitterness was faint, like nostalgia. The steam curled up and mingled with the air, a gentle sign that even after all these years, even when the promise had not been spoken aloud in ages, the feeling of waiting for a storm, for a return, had never left me. If you once made a silly childhood promise, do not take it lightly, because maybe, just maybe, it is the one thing strong enough to pull you back home. And if a memory just passed through your heart, whether it was a promise made long ago, a rainy night, or the flicker of a flashlight in an old attic, leave a comment below. You never know. Someone out there might be remembering the same moment with you. And if you would like to keep walking with me through the forgotten corners of memory, do not forget to hit subscribe. Because the old stories, they are always worth telling again.